Welcome to the Jay Sizzle Basketball Podcast, and today's episode is going to be about last night's game. I'm going to talk mainly about the Philadelphia 76ers, and then mainly with the Philadelphia 76ers, I'm going to be talking about Ben Simmons and where the 76ers and Ben Simmons go from here. As you know, the 76ers lost last night in a Game 7. It was a game which they really didn't control any of the game. They controlled a little bit of the beginning of the game. Towards the fourth quarter, they had some moments where they were ahead, but they were never able to keep their foot on the gas and get ahead by enough to secure a win. Atlanta, went on a lot of runs towards the end of the game. Trae Young did not play a great game in the beginning, but towards the end of the fourth quarter, he really stepped it up. He hit that big three-point shot. He hit that big floater, that big mid-range jumper. So Trae Young hit a couple of very big shots, throughout the stretch of this game when it mattered the most, and he struggled a lot in the beginning of this game. So it was nice to see him really pick up his energy and play well to finish the game, because he was one of the biggest factors in this game. But the biggest factor in this game was Kevin Huerter. Kevin Huerter played great, finished with 27 points, and just every time he had a matchup on him that was favorable, he took advantage of it. Whether it was a mid-range jump shot or he had a couple post fades, he had a couple three-pointers too. So Kevin Huerter really just played great, played out of his mind. He made 3 big free throws towards the end of that game too, all 3 of them. That really helped a lot. So Kevin Huerter played great. We know Kevin Huerter's potential. Coming out of Maryland, this is his third year. His first year he played pretty well. Last year he struggled a little bit, and then this year he's played pretty well. But in this series he played very well, and especially last night in Game 7. So they're going to need a guy like Kevin Huerter to continue to play well moving forward if this team wants to do something against Milwaukee in the final round. So enough with the Atlanta Hawks. This is more about the Philadelphia 76ers here. So this is a tough loss for the 76ers. This is a series that majority of us, I think, predicted the 76ers to win this series because they have a much better roster on paper. Nobody, as great as Trae Young is, yes, he's a different position than Embiid, but he's not at the level of Joel Embiid. I know Joel Embiid was a little hurt, but still there should be no reason to why Philadelphia should have lost this series. And there's a lot of factors to blame for Philadelphia losing this series. Is the fact that Ben Simmons is scared to shoot the basketball, is that one of the biggest factors on why they lost this series? Yes, but that's not the only factor. Tobias Harris really struggled in this series, and he is looked at as their third best player, but their number 2 go-to option in terms of scoring. And he really struggled in this series. You look at the first couple games, Tobias Harris played pretty well. He had 20 points in Game 1, shot 8 of 13. In Game 2, he had 22, 11 of 19. And then in Game 3, he had 22, 10 of 16. Okay, fine, you can live with all these. And then in Game 4, Game 4, he shot 8 of 15. It's great. He had 20 points. So he played well the first 4 games. But the last 3 games, in which they lost two of the last 3 games in the series, he shot 2 of 11 with 4 points in Game 5. And in Game 6, he shot 9 of 20 and had 24 points. And then last night, he went and he shot 8 of 24 and had 24 points. So I guess in Game 6, he played decent. And they won that one, so he played decent. It's livable. But Game 7, 8 of 24. And then Game 5, 2 of 11 and only on 4 points with 38 minutes. That's not acceptable either. So there's a lot of factors right now for Philadelphia that need to change. Before I get more into Ben Simmons, how about other guys, in terms of this team, struggling the way they struggled in this series? Dwight Howard didn't really show up this entire series. I know he's a bench player, but he never really showed up, right? And Tyrese Maxey played well. Tyrese Maxey played well for this team. Embiid played well. Ty Ball played pretty well, but he's young, so you got to give him more time. So Embiid, Seth Curry, of course, too. Seth Curry played very well in this series. He was a big factor in why this team was even in this series to begin with. Seth Curry, Embiid, Tyrese Maxey. Those are really the only guys, and I'll give it to Ty Ball because of his ability to play defense, but those are the only guys who really kind of shined in this series, in my opinion. Everyone else didn't really play up to their level. Harris did not play to his level. Simmons didn't play to his level. George Hill did not play too many minutes, but even when he was in those small minutes, he didn't do much at all. I would have liked to see more minutes out of Shake Milton. I don't know what happened there. Dwight Howard did not play well, like I mentioned before. So there's a lot of factors right now, and also not having Danny Green obviously hurts, because he could have helped defensively on Trae Young. So there were a lot of things that went into factor for Philadelphia to lose this series, and Ben Simmons, I think, is one of the bigger blames is one of the bigger blames for this loss. But I wouldn't put 90% of the blame on him. I'd put like 60% of the blame on Ben Simmons. And the other 40%, I think, is split between Doc Rivers and Tobias Harris Dwight Howard, some of these other guys George Hill, some of these other guys that should have played better, they didn't. And then, of course, Doc Rivers. Doc Rivers has had a knack to kind of blow big leads in games and also blow series. The game 5 where they were up 25 points, they should have never lost that game. Once they lost that game, you knew the series was kind of over at that point because you can't lose game 5 when it's tied 2-2 at home, up 25 points. You can't. There's no way they should have lost that series. Should have lost that game, and there's also no way they should have lost the series. I mean, the turning point in that game 5 was Ben Simmons. Obviously, got to, they did the hack-a-shack on him in the second half, and he couldn't make a free throw. Right? While that was the turning point in that game, what happened last night? Obviously, game 5 was a bad loss, right? Game 6, they won. They looked great in game 6, and everybody's like, they're going to win the series. But then, okay, game 5, you can put on Ben Simmons. Game 6, they played well, so nobody gets the blame because they played well. And then game 7 last night, who do you put it on? Yeah, most people want to say Ben Simmons. Okay, I'll put it on Ben Simmons. How about Tobias Harris? I mean, listen, I understand Tobias Harris has to take a lot of shots for this team to succeed the way that they're built because you have a guy like Ben Simmons who's not taking any shots, so that means Harris has to step in and take more shots than usual. But Harris just seemed like he was rushing too many shots. And I'm a big Tobias Harris fan. I think Philly should hang out to him because I think he's a good player. But he was rushing way too many three-pointers. He was just trying to play bully ball down low, trying to get by defenders on his first step. And when he couldn't get by defenders on his first step and he was defended really well, he would still go for a tough layup, contested. So, yeah, I would have liked to see Tobias Harris play better, as well. I think that really would have helped. I would have liked to see guys like Dwight Howard play a little bit off the bench, to help take a little pressure off Embiid, who was clearly hurt in this series and still played great. But at the end of the day, this is a Philly team that was much better on paper, and they lost this series because of many different factors. So let me get into the Ben Simmons factor. Let me try to think of how I'm going to say this. The fact that Ben Simmons literally cannot make a free throw and shot the worst free throw percentage on minimum of 70 attempts in playoff history out of any player, that's very bad. That's a very bad stat right there to be a part of because you have to understand if Ben Simmons can make free throws, even if it was about 72, 73%, which would be respectable for his position and the way he plays. You have to understand what that would do to his game and what that would have done to Philly in the series. Philly would have won this series 100% if Ben Simmons did shoot a higher percentage. But again, I'm not putting all the blame on Ben Simmons because Philly also would have won the series if Tobias Harris would have shot better. They would have won the series if Howard would have given them better minutes off the bench. So there's a lot of factors, but one of the factors why Philly lost was because Ben Simmons can't make a free throw. And everybody wants to talk about how Ben Simmons needs to learn how to shoot. Ben Simmons does not need to learn how to shoot a three-point shot. He needs to learn how to get a free throw and then transition that free throw into a mid-range jumper. That's what he needs to work on this offseason. I understand Philly, the fans at Philly are very unforgivable, and they want to give up on Ben Simmons, and they want him gone, and they want him to go to a team where they can get something back that would really help their team, maybe get back a shooter that could spread the floor better. But one thing you have to also understand is the contract of Ben Simmons is a big factor in whether or not the Philadelphia 76ers are going to be able to move Ben Simmons to another team. Ben Simmons will be an unrestricted free agent in 2025. He's set to make $33+ million a year every year until the 2024-2025 season, in which he'll make $40 million a year. So think about that. That's going to be a very tough contract to move. It's a very similar situation to what John Wall dealt with, when he was able to get shipped from Houston to the Wizards, but you saw that the Wizards were not able to retain much back. I mean, of course, listen, they did get Westbrook, and Westbrook was an upgrade from Wall, but they weren't able to get much back in terms of a team that's pretty relatively young in the Wizards, and they were probably trying to look for a younger point guard that had more years in him, and they weren't able to get that. They still got a great player back in Westbrook, but they weren't able to get back a young guy that I'm sure they probably would have preferred, right? So that's the thing with Ben Simmons, right? Yes, his contract is untradeable. Yes, he played very bad in this postseason. Yes, he has a lot of work on his game to be done. There's a lot of polish on his game that needs to be fixed. But think about the situation. John Wall got traded and is not as good as a player. John Wall is not as good of a player as Ben Simmons is. Ben Simmons is a better player than John Wall. It doesn't matter what happened in the postseason. It does matter, but that doesn't change the fact that Ben Simmons is a better player than John Wall. He's a better defender. He's a better playmaker, in my opinion. He's a better scorer down low. He just can't shoot. I'll take Ben Simmons, though, over John Wall in terms of age, contract, and in terms of just his ability. So you look at that situation last year with John Wall, right? He was 29 years old when he got traded. Ben Simmons is going to be 24 years old if he gets traded this offseason. That's a big difference. That's a big age difference gap. So if you think the Wizards got back Westbrook, okay, you think, yes, they probably could have arguably gotten back more. But now you take a 24-year-old who's at a higher level and is not coming off any serious injuries than John Wall was when the Wizards moved John Wall for Westbrook. And now maybe you see that Philly could actually get something better back than Westbrook and maybe a younger player too, if they were to go and trade Ben Simmons. You know, Stephen A. Smith talked about it today on First Take. He said they should trade him to Portland and get CJ McCollum. And I think this is a great trade because this would benefit both teams. Because you have to understand, Portland is a team that is the worst, arguably the worst defensive team out of any of the playoff teams this year. And every year, their Achilles heel is defense. They cannot play defense. They cannot get stops. Right? They could not get stops against a Denver team, you know, that beat them in 6. So when you look at that and you say, okay, this is a Portland team that can't get defensive stops. They haven't been able to get defensive stops for years. Who would be a perfect fit for them? You know, I think they're kind of ready, I've heard, to give up a McCollum in Portland, right? So the perfect fit would be a guy like Ben Simmons. You play him at the point guard spot, you play him at the forward spot, but you let him bring the ball up the floor. You let him and Lillard split it. They both bring the ball to the floor 50-50. But what Ben Simmons would do for this team is he would help this team so much defensively. And this team would be even better next year, in my opinion, with Ben Simmons compared to McCollum. Now, of course, Portland will have to go in and work on the free throws in the mid and just getting Ben Simmons a mid-range shot. But you can do that. That's manageable because as much as people are on Ben Simmons for not learning how to shoot, and they say he's too lazy and he's too this and he's that, okay, that could be the case, but you have to look at it from the other side. There could also be another case where this could be the Philadelphia 76ers organization's fault, or organization fault. It could be the fault of the 76ers. Because look at what happened with Markelle Fultz. Yeah, Markelle Fultz, you know, is playing better in Orlando last year. Very sad what happened with his ACL last year. I know he's going to come back stronger this year. And Markelle Fultz is playing a little better in Orlando. But look what happened in Philly. They couldn't get his jump shot right, and his jump shot was great in college. They literally changed his entire form and everything. They didn't do that with Ben Simmons, but this could be a team that doesn't, you know, that thinks too much. They could think a little too much and tell Ben Simmons, tweak this, tweak that, tweak that. And those little changes could have hurt him. You know, you don't know the situation. So the fact that they had an issue with Markelle Fultz does not necessarily mean that this is all on Ben Simmons. You know, the coaching could not be right. Whoever's telling Ben Simmons how to shoot this and that, it could be wrong. Right? And it also could be that Ben Simmons doesn't practice free throws or shooting mid-range jumpers or shooting threes enough. That could also be another factor. There's no doubt, right? Nobody will ever get to really know the story unless it comes out, and I don't think it ever will. So, you know, with that being said, if I'm Philly, I probably would trade Ben Simmons just because of the atmosphere of the city right now, where the organization wants to move. This is an organization that is stuck with Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid for a while now, and they haven't posted many positive results. They've never been to a finals. The furthest they've been is the second round. The one year they lost in 7 to Toronto, but that was the year that they had Jimmy Butler and JJ Redick, right? So now you have this young team in Philly. You have some young guys off the bench in Tyrese Maxey, right? And you have Court Motz, who's pretty solid too. You have a lot of young talent right now with Shake Milton too. This is a team that if you were to make a move for Ben Simmons and get back McCollum, it would benefit you. I talked about how it benefited Portland. Now I'm going to tell you how it would benefit Philly. It would give Philly another shooter, and which Philly kind of desperately needed. They needed another shooter in this offseason. And it would allow Philly to space the floor better. And it would also help out Embiid's game too. So the only thing, though, that would hurt Philly in this situation, and I think it would help Philly enough to the point where they could possibly compete for a championship if they were to get CJ McCollum. So I think it would help them there, right? And overall, I think it would be a help. But the only spot where it would hurt Philly would be the fact that you would lose Ben Simmons. Who's your playmaker now? Because McCollum's not really a playmaker. So who's your playmaker now? Embiid's not a playmaker. George Hill might not even be there next year, and if he is, he's not a good enough playmaker right at this stage of his career. Neither is Embiid. I already mentioned that, sorry. Tobias is not. Shake Milton's not. Tyrese Maxey, possibly, but not for a couple more years. So then you lose your playmaker, and we know a lot of teams cannot just play isolation basketball over and over and over and win games. You need to have a couple guys that can move the ball around. Look at how well Phoenix is doing. You know, you got Chris Paul and Booker, underrated playmakers. Ayton passes the ball pretty well down low too. You have Cameron Payne off the bench. He can move the ball well. So you have a lot of guys that are willing to move the ball with Phoenix, and that's part of the reason why Phoenix is doing so well right now, because they move the ball never sticks to somebody unless it goes into Booker, but we know what Booker can do in isolation. But most of the time, that ball is moving. So that could be an issue with Philly if they do trade Ben Simmons. Now, on Portland's end, I think it's more of a positive, just like Philly too. But it's not 100% a positive. There's some negatives to it too on Portland's end as well. The negative on Portland's end would be, okay, yeah, your Achilles heel is defense, and if you were to grab Ben Simmons, you would fix your defensive problems. But how about offensively? When you have enough offensively without CJ McCollum, right? Because so many games, Damian Lillard has scored 50 or 60, and those are the games Portland wins. So imagine if you take away McCollum and you add Ben Simmons, if he doesn't fix his scoring problems. Then what do you have, right? So then you don't have a great offense. So then you struggle there. So then you could be right back in the same place, arguably, as you were before. But, it's an interesting debate because there are a lot of teams out there that will go for Simmons, and this Portland move that Stephen A. Smith talked about is definitely a good one. Another one I was thinking about would be, what if you traded him to Sacramento? And I don't know if Sacramento would take this, but just hear me out here on this one. What if you moved him for De'Aaron Fox? You move Ben Simmons in a first rounder for De'Aaron Fox. The contract should align and the money should be fine because they're getting paid around the same. Yes, De'Aaron Fox is a similar player to Ben Simmons in a way, but he can shoot the ball much better. And when he gets to the free throw line, he can make his free throws. He's going to be a good playmaker because you need to get back a playmaker, in my opinion. Right? As much as McCollum would help, and I think it would be a good trade for Philly because they would get back a shooter, you still do need another playmaker. And yeah, Philly can go along the ways and go get a Rondo, go get a guy like this or that, but you don't want to always have to rely on that. So let's say I'm the person that's looking at this Philly trade in a negative way with McCollum, and I'm saying, okay, I'm looking at the negative side that I gave you guys, and I'm saying you don't have a playmaker. So then maybe you go the De'Aaron Fox way, and you get back a playmaker, and a guy who can score around 23, 24 a game for this team, and who can shoot the ball good enough, not great, but good enough, and get to the free throw line and make free throws. Interesting, huh? Because I know Philly talked about trading Matisse Thybulle a lot in a lot of packages because he's one of the younger players in this league who has great potential. But in my opinion, I would not trade Thybulle quite yet. I would give Thybulle one more chance. Thybulle has played 2 years. Yes, he's not a great scorer. He's a guy who's only going to give you 6 or 7 a game. But he's an all-NBA second defensive team guy, and he doesn't take a lot of three-pointers, but when he takes them, he makes them. And he has offensive potential. He has room to grow offensively. He can be a good offensive player. He's shown flashes. So I'm holding on to Matisse Thybulle. I'm holding on to Tyrese Maxey unless I get something that absolutely shocks me. So, that's where I think Philly should move in one of those two directions, either the Portland trade or the Sacramento trade. Let me give you one more trade that Philly can make to give up Ben Simmons. So I think this will be an interesting one. I think that you guys, and I want you guys, after I give you these 3 trades, I want you guys to kind of comment down below and tell me which trade, if you were in the Philly organization right now, which trade would you make out of all these trades I'm gonna give you here? What if you were to go to Chicago, right, and trade away Ben Simmons in 2 first-rounders for Zach LaVine? Maybe you throw in another player like a George Hill or a Seth Curry, right? What if you were to make that trade and you get Zach LaVine back? What do you guys think that would happen there? Because that's a really interesting one because Zach LaVine is a pretty solid playmaker, probably a little better than McCollum. But he would provide that scoring, and he'd be able to space the floor out with Embiid, and then also probably help Harris's game too. I mean, maybe you put Tyrese Maxey your starting point guard spot next year. How do you guys feel if the Sixers rolled out a starting lineup of Tyrese Maxey, Zach LaVine, Tobias Harris, Matisse Thybulle, and then you have Joel Embiid? Maybe, I don't know. You guys just got to give me your opinions. I think that's a solid trade too. Any of those trades for Philly, I think, would help. Certain ones would help more than others in different areas, right? That Bulls trade that I talked about would help them with their scoring and a little bit with their playmaking. That Sacramento trade would probably help only a little bit with their scoring, right? But it would help. It would stay the same with playmaking. Unlike the Bulls trade, that would help a lot with scoring and take a huge dip playmaking wise. And then that Portland trade would kind of just be like the Chicago trade. It would help maybe about the same scoring wise, but then it would not be a great help playmaking wise. So you have to look at all 3 of those options. I think there are 3 solid trades and just say which one does Philly need the most, which one is going to help Joel Embiid's game the most. That's the most important thing, right? Joel Embiid's a franchise player. You're building around him. He's untouchable. So which one of these 3 trades would help Joel Embiid the most? So you guys comment down below. Let me know. Let me know what you think the Sixers are going to do from here. Not just with Ben Simmons, right? I want to hear what you guys think they're going to do with Ben Simmons. But I also want to hear what you guys think they'll do with Tobias Harris. Because that's another interesting one too. I don't think they'll trade him. But I want you guys to know what you think they'll do. So that's going to wrap it up for the 76ers podcast. Make sure you guys like this video, subscribe to the channel, follow the Instagram, and I hope you guys enjoyed this podcast. And I can't wait to talk about more playoff basketball with you guys.